Okay, here's a little update on the 3 paintings that I showed you making in the gallery last week. And I have titled these 3 Jardin du Chateau, the Chateau Garden. Jardin du Chateau.
Jardin du Château.
I keep practicing it, getting that little French flair. But it's the Chateau Garden, and each piece has flowers in it, abstracted. There's a chateau in there. There's a little gardener in there, if you can see her with a flower sticking out of her pocket. And this is how the 3 turned out. And let me show you how I finished them off. Okay, now the pieces that I was working on last week while I was in the gallery, I'm going to show you what I do to seal them and finish them off. In this case, I'm using a cold wax medium, Dorland's wax medium. I also use a Gamblin cold wax medium, and I'll have them linked in the description below. And the nice thing about using a cold wax medium is it goes over acrylic paint. It's actually meant to mix in with oil-based paints, but it goes fine over acrylic paint because you can put oil over acrylic, you cannot put acrylic over oil. So when you use the cold wax as a top coat, you better be sure that you're done with adding papers or paint or marks because you're pretty much sealing everything off now. I use a chip brush to put my cold wax on because not only does it get into all the nooks and crannies, it helps push the wax into all the nooks and crannies. It also is strong enough to, take the wax out of the jar. It's a really creamy consistency, but just a regular paintbrush might be a little bit trickier to use. So once I've got the wax spread out evenly, and you remember, don't put it on too thick. It's kind of like waxing a car. And I remember my first car was a little red Volkswagen, and the first time I ever waxed a car, I figured more wax, the shinier it would be. And au contraire, the more wax, you're never getting it off, especially when you do it out in the sunshine and let it dry on. So my car then looked like a red car with film on it. So you don't want that to happen with your paintings. You put your wax on and then make sure you wipe off all the excess. It's a pretty thin coat. It really doesn't take a lot, and it's actually better to go thinner. And if you want to add another coat, to be able to build coats up rather than have to scrape coats off. So again, I'm using this for my top coat. It's really great because it will not run my Stabilo pencils, which are water soluble and they're not disturbed by the wax. So yeah, I love the cold wax as a top coat. Now this piece already has the cold wax top coat on it, so all I need to do is take a soft rag, and I like the old linen dish towels, they work really great, and just buff it out. And just make sure it's dry. I let the wax dry for about an hour before I buff it, and the coat's so thin that it shouldn't take much longer than that. But as you can see, it gets a really nice luster going on. And I love that. I love that the paint is protected and it has a nice sheen to it without having to top coat it with a gloss medium or a semi-gloss medium. And now that I've got it top coated, I'm going to frame them. And I just want to tell you my thoughts on framing. Sometimes I use really good frames, and if it's a piece that really calls for it, I will spend the money and put it in a great frame, a floater frame, and I'll spend some money on it. But more often than not, I'll have a customer ask me, do you have a different color frame, or that's not the color frame I want. So what I do with my pieces, especially when I'm using the 3/4 inch canvases that really need to be framed, is I will buy an inexpensive frame. These frames are, a lot of times they're buy one, get one free, buy one, get two free at Michael's. And I just want the frame. I don't need the plexi and I don't need the backing. I just need the frame. So I use a little tool to flip up and bend back the little brads that hold the plexi and the backing in. And they're going to stay in place. I don't really need them. I won't use them for the canvas because the canvas sticks out from the frame. I'm going to take the backing, the plexi, and the paper out. And I use all of those things. I'll use the plexi for something. Usually I'll use it for cyanotypes. The paper, I'll flip over and use it for a paint palette. And the backing, who knows? I might need to back something else, or I can actually use it to paint on. So I then slip the 3/4 inch canvas, painted canvas, into the frame, and it usually goes in pretty easy. And there you go. It's a simple frame. I usually always do just a plain black frame. If I'm doing a series, I make sure the frames all match. And then that way, if a customer doesn't like the frame, I don't have to switch it out for something else. I just frame things so they can see how it looks framed. And I don't charge more for the frame. My paintings are the price, whether they're framed or not. And that way the customer, if they want to, they can take the painting and have it reframed. Now, these frames are not as thick as the canvas, so what I do is I use an old trick we used to use with oil paintings when I was doing plein air, and I just take used canvas, and I've always got a couple rolls of used canvas around, and I'll cut corners out, and they will get stapled in, and that's what actually holds the painting into the canvas, and it works really well. And once I have the frame attached and I feel it's secure, I will add D-rings and a wire to the back of the canvas. And I connect those directly, I screw the D-rings directly into the wood surrounding the canvas because that's a little bit more secure. I would have done it here, but I had already taken home my D-rings and my drill. So you get the idea. It's a pretty simple way to finish off a painting. Not to mention, it goes without saying that once you finish your piece and you frame it, sometimes it can be kind of crazy. I have finished off and framed pieces of scrap paper that I've glued onto something, and you put a frame or mat around it, and voila, you have your next masterpiece. So I think it just really finishes it off, and for most customers, they do like to have things framed. I think that's just the way that we're kind of used to seeing things. So it's nice when you can frame it, and when you can frame it affordably and let your customer decide what color they want and if they want to switch it out. I always make sure that I put my corners onto the frames as well, especially with as many shows and art fairs that I do, it's so easy to bang up frames, especially when you're working with black frames. It never fails. I always carry a Sharpie or black paint with me because I've always got to touch up my frames. So I like to make sure I have corners on them and have them all set and ready to go. So there you have it. This is the Chateau Garden, or Jardin du Chateau. And I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. And I'm pretty happy that you're here to watch and see what I'm up to in the studio. Now that the gallery show is over and I have nothing really up in front of me right away, I'm going to take a little break. I think I'm going to head off to the mountains for a couple of days. So until I see you next time, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, because that really helps out my channel and I really appreciate it and it keeps me coming back. So thank you so much for being here, and I think I'm going to see you again next week. Bye-bye for now.